Here I am at the Oklahoma Science Museum, and they have a really neat display of some things about space. So there are all of these Project Mercury pieces. Look, over here is like the command center, and some of the modules and the different things. And over there, isn't that cool? Okay, so I'd like to read to you a book called Footprints on the Moon by Alexandra C. It's the brightest object in our night sky, a big yellow white disk. It shrinks to a silver sliver and disappears. Then it's born again, growing full, bright, and mysterious. Throughout the centuries, the moon's changing face has beckoned us silently. We've looked and wondered, imagined, and dreamed. 24 astronauts have crossed the vast ocean of space that separates the Earth and the moon. 12 have left footprints. These are the different phases of the moon. Sometimes you see the moon and it looks big and round, and sometimes it just looks like a little sliver, and sometimes you can't even see it at all. About 4,000 years ago, prehistoric people watched the rising and setting moon at Stonehenge, a temple built from massive stones that were arranged for keeping track of the motions of the moon, the sun, and the stars. Nearly 2,000 years later, the ancient Greeks thought that the moon's dark areas were oceans and the bright spots were land. In 1610, the Italian scientist and inventor Galileo Galilei published a book called The Starry Messenger. The book described the moon and stars as they appeared in his handmade spyglass or telescope. Galileo was amazed to see that the moon's surface was covered with tall mountains and deep craters. Although the telescope made the heavens look closer, space travel was still just a dream. The dream suddenly seemed achievable at the dawn of the 20th century. In 1903, Orville Wright piloted the first airplane, and in 1926, the inventor Robert H. Goddard launched the first liquid-fueled rocket. Less than 20 years later, powerful rockets were used as weapons in World War II. After the war, scientists worked on rockets for space travel. Daring test pilots, who later became the world's first astronauts, pushed the limits of aviation by flying planes to the outer edge of Earth's atmosphere. Now, space was within reach. The desire to explore space became an intense competition between the United States and the Soviet Union, modern-day Russia and its former republics. The two countries were enemies in a Cold War, a conflict that threatened the world with nuclear destruction despite the lack of actual combat. One of the fiercest battles was the space race. The Soviets took the lead in 1957 when they had launched Sputnik 1, the world's first artificial satellite. In 1961, a Soviet, Yuri Gagarin, became the first person in space. The American pilot Alan Shepard was the second. On May 25, 1961, President John F. Kennedy declared that before the end of the decade, the United States would try to send a man to the moon and return him safely to the Earth. The space race was now at a finish line, and the United States was determined to get there first. These are the NASA astronauts, the first Mercury astronauts over here. Project Gemini, from 1964 to 1966, tested new equipment and skills such as rendezvous, the meeting of space vehicles while in Earth's orbit. Project Apollo was next. Its mission was to fly men to the moon. The race to the moon demanded the hard work and dedication of at least 400,000 people. The fast pace also took its toll. On January 27, 1967, the crew of Apollo 1 died in a fire inside the command module during a practice countdown on the launch pad. The next command module was carefully redesigned to correct several fatal flaws, including a cabin door that was almost impossible to open from the inside. After several unmanned test missions, Apollo 7 was the first Apollo manned mission and the first U.S. spacecraft to carry 3 people. Less than 2 years after the Apollo 1 tragedy, Apollo 8 was aimed at the moon. This was a bold plan. 3 astronauts would orbit the moon and return to the Earth. The Apollo 8 astronauts, Commander Frank Borman, James A. Lovell Jr., and William A. Anders, were ready for their adventure. On December 21st, 1968, they became the first people to blast off atop a 363-foot tall Saturn V rocket. It took 69 hours to reach the moon. On Christmas Eve, 1968, Apollo 8 flew around the moon. For the first time ever, humans saw the lunar far side, a view previously seen only in photographs taken by an unmanned probe. On the far side, radio transmissions to Earth were impossible, and the astronauts lost contact with mission control. Back above the near side, the unexpected sight of the Earth rising above the barren moon stunned the astronauts. "Oh my God, look at that picture over there," Commander Borman said, taking a black and white photograph. Bill Anders quickly loaded a roll of color film into the camera and took 2 more photographs of Earthrise. "This is Apollo 8 coming to you from the moon," Commander Borman announced. The astronauts were broadcast on television to an audience of more than 500 million people. They took the awestruck world on a tour of the moon, describing craters, mountains, and future landing sites. They talked about the long shadows cast by the rising and setting sun that made the moonscape look jagged and sinister. But Earth itself made the greatest impression on both the astronauts and the watching world. Jim Lovell said that the Earth was a grand oasis in the big vastness of space. Apollo 8 crossed once again into silence behind the moon. The spacecraft could return home only if the rocket engine fired. If it failed, the astronauts would remain in lunar orbit forever. Scientists at Mission Control waited anxiously. Jim Lovell's voice broke the silence as the spaceship emerged from behind the moon. "Please be informed," he exclaimed, "there is a Santa Claus." The engine had worked. On Christmas Day, Apollo 8 headed for home, back to the little blue marble in space. The mission was a perfect success. Apollo 8 had orbited the moon 10 times, photographing it and gathering information about its surface. In addition to these important scientific achievements, humans had seen an Earthrise for the very first time. Although the Soviets put the first man and woman in space and accomplished the first unmanned lunar landing, they ultimately lost the race to the moon. On July 3rd, 1969, all hopes of a manned moon landing literally went up in smoke as the Soviet rocket exploded on the launch pad. For America, it was now simply a race against time. It was July 20th, 1969, 3:16 p.m. Houston time. Apollo 11's computer-controlled lunar module, called Eagle, was headed straight for a field of boulders on the moon. With less than 60 seconds worth of fuel left, Commander Neil Armstrong took controls and steered the Eagle towards safer ground. Moon dust swirled under the engine, then all was quiet. Armstrong's voice broke the silence. "Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed." A brilliant rising sun cast long shadows across the bleak landscape. Beyond the horizon, there was only the blackness of space. 69 miles above the lunar surface, Apollo 11 astronaut Michael Collins circled the moon in the command module Columbia. Traveling at 3,700 miles per hour, he searched the moon's surface for the Eagle. Even with the help of a computerized sextant, an instrument used in navigation, Collins never spotted the Eagle during his 22 hours alone in the Columbia. While flying above the moon's near side, Collins could hear his crewmates even though he couldn't see them. He listened spellbound as Armstrong and Aldrin prepared to leave the lunar module for the first ever moonwalk. As Buzz Aldrin opened the hatch and Neil Armstrong moved onto the ladder, Columbia flew behind the moon's far side. Mike Collins couldn't hear Armstrong speak as he stepped onto the moon, but millions of people back on the Earth could. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Armstrong had planned to say that's one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind, but he was so excited he forgot to say the word "a" in the now famous quote. Armstrong took pictures and collected some powdery black soil before the amazed Aldrin joined him on the moon's surface. People watched and listened as Aldrin and Armstrong unfurled and raised an American flag on the Sea of Tranquility. The flag only looked like it was flying. Wires stiffened the stars and stripes into a permanent flutter above the airless moonscape. Throughout history, explorers have claimed newly discovered territory by flying their country's flag. But no one nation owns the moon. It belongs to all people, past, present, and future. The astronauts did not claim the moon for the United States. Instead, they celebrated their achievement with their fellow Americans and the world. Sorry. Now there was work to do. Aldrin and Armstrong set up a seismometer to detect moonquakes, as well as a laser reflector for measuring the distance between the moon and the Earth to within centimeters. They also collected 22 kilograms, about 47 pounds, of rocks and soil. Since the moon's gravity is 1/6 of Earth's, the astronauts felt lighter and described the way they walked on the moon as kangaroo hopping. Aldrin and Armstrong spent less than one Earth day, just 21 hours and 36 minutes on the moon's surface. Their moonwalk lasted for only 2 hours and 31 minutes. Despite their rush, the astronauts felt as if they were on a world where time almost stood still. One lunar day lasts about a month. It takes 29 and a half days for the moon to make one full spin on its axis. On any one place on the moon, the sun shines for 2 weeks, followed by another 2 weeks of dark night. There on the Sea of Tranquility, during the brief early hours of that lunar morning, our universe was forever expanded. Our dream of touching the ancient, mysterious moon had finally come true. Mike Collins' biggest fear was about the entire Apollo 11 mission was that he might have to return to Earth alone. As Eagle's liftoff time approached, I got really nervous. If their engine didn't work, there was nothing I could do to rescue them from the surface. I simply had to come home by myself, leaving Neil and Buzz to die on the surface of the moon. Fortunately, Eagle blasted off the moon and was safely reunited with Columbia. Now the astronauts were on their way home to parades and parties. John F. Kennedy's goal had been achieved. Apollo 11 fulfilled the dream of sending explorers to the moon. It also answered important scientific questions. The seismometer proved that moonquakes are rare. Scientists learned from the rock samples that parts of the moon were once hot with flowing volcanic lava. New minerals were also discovered. Armalcolite, a new type of titanium, was named after Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins. From 1969 to 1972, 6 more Apollo spacecraft traveled to the moon. 5 missions actually got there. Apollo 13 never landed because of an explosion in an oxygen tank. With each lunar landing, scientists discovered new information about the moon. They learned that the moon is ancient, about 4.5 billion years old. The Apollo moon rocks also suggested that the moon was formed in a hot and violent crash after an early Mars-sized object collided with Earth. The moon was formed from the dust and gas that flew into space after the crash. Today, many astronauts and scientists think we should return to the moon. Some astronomers believe that the moon is the perfect place from which to study the universe. Moonquakes are 1,000,000 times less likely than earthquakes, making the moon a quiet, stable platform on which to build sensitive telescopes. The 2 weeks of nighttime on the moon make it easier to study the stars, and with no atmosphere to blur the view, the stars are visible even in the daylight. Sending people back to the moon would be very costly. If cheaper rocket launching systems can be developed, then more scientific moon missions could occur. Private businesses might also send workers to the moon to mine minerals or operate solar power stations. Even tourist flights to the moon could be in our future. Only 12 humans have walked on the moon. Others may follow. Now we dream of exploring more of our solar system. A round-trip mission to Mars could take 2 years or more. The challenges are great, but our need to explore, to discover, and to succeed is even greater. When astronauts raise the flag once again, we will all experience the adventure as we share the ancient desire to understand our place in the universe. I love you guys. I'll see you later.